Do the quizzes have the same value as the projects and vocabulary lists? No, they do not. So the for each unit, so each unit is weighted evenly. The projects are worth the most, so they're worth more than half. Actually, let me double check that, my weighting. Hold on. Yes, they're worth more than half. So the major project, because it's something that you're doing on your own. There's no way to cheat when you do a project. I mean, you are making the project, and so it's worth about 60% of each unit. The vocabulary list is worth 10 to 15%, and that one I modify depending on how big it is. It's a little bit smaller in some units and a little bit bigger in others. He's gonna email me. Okay, cool. That's fine. No problem at all. And the quiz is worth about 30% for each unit. So the project is by far worth the most. The vocabulary list, while important, is not worth the bulk of the mark. And then sort of like the leftover is for the quiz. So it's not that the quizzes aren't worth anything. They are. They're worth about 30% of the mark per unit. Which means that your quizzes cumulatively are worth about 30% of the mark of the course. But by far, the biggest component comes from your project in each unit. So that's where you're really getting an opportunity to showcase your knowledge and understanding of the unit. And it's more interactive. Like, I'm able to determine from what you've done, like, how well you actually understood the stuff that we were discussing. That's kind of the purpose of it. So anyway, that's what the breakdown looks like. Okay, but they're not weighted evenly. Also regarding marks, so I got Evan's email, so that's good. Okay, so then who am I still missing? Sammy, Derek, Trenton. All right, will you be introducing this unit's project today? Sure, good idea. Give you as much lead time as possible. It's a good idea for me to introduce it as close to the beginning as possible. All right, you guys can't see this. Sorry, I got a little bit flustered because I got behind setting everything up because I had to keep restarting my laptop. Sorry. There we go. Okay. So, hopefully you remember. Oh, I think I'm looking at the wrong class. Yes, this is the other class. Hopefully you remember. We started the animal systems unit. Oh yeah, right. I was going to mention marks. Sorry. Oh boy, I'm being really scatterbrained today. So you should have received feedback and marks for the first two assignments. That is the vocab list and the species spotlight assignment. Please, if you're not sure about the marks, I try and leave as much detailed feedback as possible to sort of explain what happened, good or bad. And so read the feedback before you email me. Oftentimes people say, oh, I don't understand this or whatever. It's like, well, you didn't read my comments, that's why. So I leave comments on the actual project itself, usually with those little like speech bubble things. You can, Brightspace lets you put like little speech bubbles, and then if you just hover your mouse over the speech bubble, it'll show you the comment. So I usually use those to leave comments explaining like, oh, this is, something's a little bit funky here, or this is perfect, or whatever. So have a quick look at those. Definitely look at the feedback on the vocabulary list before you continue working on your new vocabulary list, because 9 times out of 10, if you're losing marks on your vocabulary list, it's something structural. So I'll give you an example. Well, maybe most is probably not fair. A lot of students are leaving out the justification, or maybe justification is also the wrong word. They're leaving out the reasoning for why that particular term is important in this unit, the connection between the term and the unit. So that is like the last part of every definition. You're gonna explain to me what the object is, or what the term is. Is it a theory? Is it a structure? Is it a process? Like, tell me what it is. What does it do? So like, what is your understanding of that thing? Okay. Provide relevant examples if necessary. So oftentimes it makes sense to include examples. And then the last component is that you're going to tell me why it's important for this unit, for each one. How is that terminology used in terms of genetics, or in terms like, why is it important in genetics, that particular thing? Like, attach it to what we've learned. Some people have added in terms in there where the connection to the unit is very loose. And that's not necessarily bad, but you do have to tie it back then in your explanation and explain like, why is this important in the study of genetics, this particular word? Or why is this particular word important in the study of animal structure and function, or physiology also as it's known? Okay, so don't forget to do that. Maybe look at the comments. I've let you know if that's something that you're missing. In a lot of your definitions, I've let you know in the feedback. So it's important to look at that feedback before you submit another one. Now, I realized that there was no opportunity for feedback between the first and the second one, which is why if you made the same mistakes twice, that's fine. That's not a big deal. I didn't like double discount you or anything. I mean, the marks will probably be very similar for the first and second vocab list if that's where you're at. I mean, you're still missing components, but it's not like I am concerned with the fact that you're still not including this particular thing because you had no feedback in between. From this point forward, I do expect that you are making an attempt to, incorporate those things that you are missing. Okay, so I do mark them a little bit harder after this point in terms of you should have all the required components. Now, as another comment to that, from this point forward, students typically do tend to include all of the important components, and so the marks always go up, because if you were missing that at the beginning, well, generally you're not missing it now because you noticed that and now you included it, and so people's marks actually tend to go up, not down, after this point on the vocabulary lists because they're incorporating the feedback. So anyway, just as a thing to mention, because people get kind of bummed about that, but there's no reason to get bummed. It's usually positive. It works in your favor. I mean, if you care to put the work into it. So that's regarding the vocabulary list. I'm sure you guys are wondering, well, what about my other vocabulary list? I'm almost done those. I think I have 4 more. So I'll get those back to you today. For Meiosis Live, I am 6 presentations in. So I'm a little bit behind, obviously. Each presentation is roughly 7-8 minutes. I'm going to do the math on here. So I got about 24 of them left. Okay, and then I need maybe about 5 minutes to make comments. So that's I got about 6 hours left of marking for the Meiosis Live projects. I don't think that I will finish that today, but you never know. I'll certainly shoot for it. And then as soon as I'm done that, I will give you a mark update. For the Meiosis Live projects, there's no reason why I can't just return them to you as I finish them, but just be aware you're not all going to get your mark back simultaneously. So as I finish your Meiosis Live, I'll just hit the publish button and send the comments and the mark back to you. So some of you guys are going to get that back today, and some of you will get it back tomorrow. And then by the weekend, hopefully we'll be totally caught up in here. So anyway, that's my timeline. That's what I'm working with. The project. Let's talk about the project for the animal systems unit. Okay, so as always, there is a preview here so we can read it together. There is a vocabulary list. You guys know that. You already started it the last day that you were with me. And the project for this unit is the medical technology presentation. I'm going to click on that. Okay, so this is a research project. Basically, you are going to do some research and you're going to present it to me. Normally, if we were doing this in class, I did a very similar project when we were in class last year, but you just presented it to the class, and the idea was that everybody would learn a little bit about different technologies, and we did a sign-up sheet so that we wouldn't have any overlap. I skipped the sign-up now because, I mean, it doesn't really matter if you have overlap with somebody else because they're not for everybody to watch. Initially, way back in Quad 1, I did have it so that we posted these and then everybody watched everybody else's presentations. But the main problem with that is a lot of students, a very high proportion of students, felt uncomfortable presenting and recording and then having other students watch their recorded presentation. I'm not 100% sure why. It's the same as doing it in class, but I guess the idea of recording it and having that like up somewhere where other people could access it was causing a lot of anxiety for students. So I removed that. It was honestly half the class. Half the class told me they were uncomfortable doing it, and so it's not like it was just like one or two people. So that was a little bit surprising to me, but I do get it. I do get it. So anyway, these are only for me. I'm the only one who's going to see your presentation. So let's go through what you actually need to include in it. And just so you know, there is an exemplar of a presentation from, I believe it's last quad, that is an extremely well done version of this. So if you're looking for what this presentation should look like, there is a perfect example there you can download and watch it. I highly recommend that, by the way, especially if you're not sure sort of how to format this. It's extremely well done. So it's a 5 to 7 minute presentation. If you have all the included components or all the required components, it'll be somewhere around 5 to 7 minutes, closer to 7 than 5 probably. As a heads up, some students last squad handed in a 2-minute presentation or a 3-minute presentation. I mean, you can probably guess it did not include all of the things that you need to include in the presentation. But I mean, obviously that happens sometimes. But you're not. I don't think you're going to be able to do it in less than 5-ish minutes. So just as a heads up, if you're coming in really low for time, you may want to think about that. Now, on the other end of that, you can effectively communicate what you need to in about 7 minutes. So if you're at the 8-minute mark, okay, it's a little on the long side, that's fine. But don't go over 8, okay? Once you start getting over 8, you are adding a lot of extra content that just does not need to be included in the project. And I will mention that the exemplar that I have is, I think, slightly over 8 minutes. It's like 8 minutes and something seconds, I think. I can't remember exactly. So there is some extraneous stuff in that presentation that's not entirely necessary. I will ask you to please try and limit your presentations to no more than 8 minutes. And the reason for that is, I just mentioned to you that I have about 6 hours of Meiosis Lives to watch. If everybody goes over 8 minutes or is in the 8-minute neighborhood, it's something like 7.5 or 8 hours of marking for me to watch your presentations. I'm happy to watch them. I want to watch them, but that is extremely onerous. That is a really, really long time. I would prefer to have more around the 5-hour mark of marking, which is if you keep it between 5 to 7 minutes, that keeps it in a more reasonable 5 hours of me watching your videos, which I love to watch them. They're always interesting. I've often learned stuff from your presentations, but we'll try and keep it in a reasonable neighborhood. And you can think of this sort of as a preview to university as well, or college, because in college, if you are asked to submit a 2-page paper, they don't read anything after 2 pages. It just gets thrown away, or crossed out. Or if you're, going in front of the class and you're giving a 10-minute presentation, at the end of 10 minutes, they just cut you off and say, next, next person goes now. You only get 10. There's no more time exists. So certainly no TA that's being paid to mark your papers in university is going to mark beyond the maximum. They don't care. They will just cross it out. So it pays to be able to do this stuff in a reasonably concise way. So please consider the time. I would appreciate it. Okay. Anyway, what's your presentation about? Well, you're going to pick up a technology, okay, and the technology is meant to be a diagnostic technology or a treatment technology. So it's either used to find a illness and diagnose an illness, or it's used to treat an illness. So you can go either direction. Okay, so some technologies do both. So if your technology does both, that's fine as well. But it can be either. It doesn't have to be diagnostic equipment, and it doesn't have to be treatment equipment, but it does have to be one of those. Okay. And it specifically has to be something that diagnoses or treats an illness of the digestive, respiratory, or circulatory system. Okay, it doesn't have to be specific to that system. So for example, you could talk about X-ray, which is diagnostic, and you can diagnose stuff in all 3 systems with an X-ray. So that's fine. But it has to be something that diagnoses at least one thing from one of those systems, because the whole point is the unit is focused on those 3 systems. So you need to be able to incorporate your knowledge of one of those 3 systems into the presentation. Remember that the purpose of this presentation is for you to have an opportunity to explain to me some of the things that you learned in the unit. And I think often students forget that that is the entire purpose of the project, because they will attempt to do the project in a way that they never discuss anything that we did in class. That defeats the entire purpose of the presentation. So you're supposed to be using your knowledge of the anatomy of these systems, your knowledge of the physiology of these systems, like the physiology, like how the anatomy functions. Okay? So, that's the whole point of this. So if you're not talking about the anatomy of your system, and you're not talking about the physiology of your system, how the parts work, you kind of skipped over the entire purpose of the presentation. So always keep that in mind in the background. You are going to demonstrate your knowledge of the 3 key systems. It doesn't have to be all 3, but at least of one of the key systems. Okay? The secondary component of this is you're going to show me your ability to do some research and tell me about, in this particular case, the function, history, and importance of a technology that you are going to choose. Okay? So, as usual, you do need to cite your sources. And now that we're getting into research project territory, citing your sources is going to become a lot more important for you. So we're going to use a very specific method here for capturing information from your research. We're going to use a research document, okay? And I need to explain to you how to use the research document, because this is frequently done incorrectly in students' projects, and there is an important reason for the research document. So you've done research projects before, guaranteed, in your classes. One of the things that students have a very strong tendency to do is to copy information from a source and put it directly into their presentation. Like a copy and paste, straight over. There is no context in academia where you are permitted to do that. You can never do that. So, I mean, I think you guys are probably aware that that's plagiarism. Even though you know intrinsically that that's plagiarism, I'm sure you all know that, people still do it. People still do it all the time. So I'm going to caution you now, don't do that with your presentation, okay? If the language that you're using in your presentation does not seem like it's coming from you, I'm going to check. Please don't plagiarize. There is no point in doing it, and you learn nothing when you do it. So don't do it, all right? So there's my warning to everybody right now at the start. It's so easy to do it, but don't do it, okay? And it's a terrible habit to get into because it's a great way to get thrown out of university. And I had friends that got thrown out for plagiarizing or cheating on exams, unfortunately, but both of those things will get you thrown out of university. So do not plagiarize. And just because you cite it at the end doesn't mean that you can copy and paste it from a source. That's not how it works. What a citation means is that you've confirmed that the knowledge that is there is in fact correct based on this source. That's what citations do. They don't allow you to copy and paste information unless you're quoting, but you don't quote in science. There's virtually no reason why you would ever have a quotation in a science paper. It's extremely rare. You are going to discuss what you've learned about in a source in your own words, but you're not going to quote something from another source. It's just never done. So keep that in mind. And so one of the ways that you separate that out, and this strategy, by the way, is going to be useful for you forever. You can use this in any research project in university, college, which is something that you should be thinking about preparing for at this point, is a research document. So let me explain how the research document works. I wish this would open this in a new window. It's kind of annoying that it doesn't. I guess I can force it to. Okay, so here's a sample research document, okay? And you know what? You can basically use this exact one. If you want to make a copy of this, go ahead. The idea behind this is that as you are doing your research, not after, but as you do your research, you're going to record the citation for whatever source you're using. Okay, so let's say, I found this article on radiation therapy. Okay, APA citation, boom. That's where I got it from. Okay, notice that APA citations include things like the date, the title of the article, etc. I've noticed that some people's APA citations are a little bit shady and don't include the things that are actually required in an APA citation. So make sure that your citation is actually correct. It makes sense. And then what you do is you summarize what you've just learned about in point form in your own words. Okay? This is the part that students never do. They don't have a research document, so they take stuff directly from sources and put it into their presentation, which is a big no-no. You don't do that, because when you do that, the temptation for just taking the direct wording or phrasing from where you're getting it from is too strong. You're going to read it, and you're going to basically either write the exact same thing or maybe change a word or two words. That's paraphrasing. You don't paraphrase either. So this is not about paraphrasing. This is about reading the source material, thinking about what you learned, and then writing, what did I just learn from this thing that I read? So this actually has a two-pronged importance. One, if you're reading something and thinking about it and then writing it down, you are not going to plagiarize that source. You are going to include the information from the source, but you're going to have it in what are your own thoughts. Okay, so you basically have eliminated any opportunity for you to plagiarize. Okay, boom. So that's already in itself excellent. The second component of this is if you read it and think about it and write it down, you've actually had to think about the thing that you read. So that is going to mean that you're going to understand the thing that you're reading more. Okay? What I often see in presentations from students, another thing that I often see is people including words or phrases or complete thoughts and the student presenting it has no idea what it means. They are just writing down something that they saw, and they have no idea what the words in it mean. That is not acceptable, guys. You cannot do that. You cannot include information where you don't understand the words that are in the thing that you read. I have seen students do this in grad school. Okay, I have seen a student make a grad school presentation where they obviously plagiarized stuff. And then they went up and used a bunch of words that sounded really odd coming out of their mouths, which made me think, oh boy, this doesn't sound like the person actually understood this. And then, of course, after you do a presentation in grad school, you have a round table and you take questions from the audience. That's how it always works. And wow, I can tell you that does not go very well. Because the person doesn't know anything about the topic they're presenting. They are just talking about, they're basically just reading something that they read previously. That you do not understand the topic if you're doing that. And what you're demonstrating to me, if you do that in a research project, is that you have no idea what you're talking about and you didn't do it. Okay? Don't do that. Don't get caught doing that. Don't get caught doing that ever. And if you use this strategy, it will prevent you from getting caught up in that and accidentally including information you don't understand or words that you don't understand. If you don't understand a word, guys, look it up. It's called a dictionary, okay? I mean, or ask. I'm happy to talk with you about anything that you find in your research. I'm here to support you. But you can't include stuff that you don't understand. That makes no sense. So you're going to summarize these in your own words in point form. Try and keep them fairly brief thoughts. Sometimes you got to include a little bit more information in a thought. So it's not, the length of it's not that important. But once you start writing full, long sentences in your research document, again, there's a tendency to take the wording straight from the source. And so it's better to summarize it in point form as succinctly and briefly as you can. Okay? So that is the intent of the research document. I got to be really clear and explain this here because most people tend to not use the research document correctly. So you get marks for this, okay? Your research document is part of what you submit. You must submit a research document. If you don't submit it, I won't accept your project because my assumption then is you took it directly from somewhere and you're not citing anywhere where the information came from, which means that it's not reliable information. So you have to submit this document, all right? And it's a good thing to practice. So I'm going to stop going on about the research document, but I will mention that it is actually extremely important, and it's a skill. It's a skill that every student really needs to work on. All right, so that's the first part. You got a research document. You do all your research. You get it all together. What are you going to show me? Well, you're going to tell me, give me a title slide. Tell me about your name, course code. What is the technology? Okay. By the way, for each of these headings, this doesn't have to be one slide. You can overlap these into 2, 3, 4 slides, whatever you need in order to space out your information in a readable way. So if you find that you have 15 points on a slide, just spread it out, guys. Put it on 2 slides or 3 slides. That's totally fine. So Lillian, you do. The very last slide that you're going to have, and I mention it here, is just a works cited. It's not your research document, but it's just literally copying and pasting all of the APA citations from your research document onto the last slide. That's all it is. Okay. So you do need to have that at the end, but you don't need to indicate where in your presentation each thing is that you've cited, because I'll know that from your research document. Okay. You can kind of think of your research document also as like an in-text citation where you're showing me where you've got each of your pieces of information from. Okay, so the first component of your presentation is you're going to tell me a little bit about the development of your technology. Draw me a timeline. What is the history of the development of your technology? When was it first conceptualized? What was the first iteration of your technology? What did it look like? How did it function? How was it improved over time? That's the idea of the timeline, okay? So you want to just show me what are the various degrees of improvement. Then in 1950, a lensing technology was used that made the images much sharper. In 1975, there was a new technology that was added to this technology. It allowed it to be safer for patients or whatever, okay? There's usually a timeline of development for these things over time, and things are upgraded and enhanced as they change over time, and that's what you're going to tell me about, okay? Are you going to necessarily find all of the information about the timeline of development for your technology on one source? No. I know students often will email me and say, well, I found an article on the history of blank, and it doesn't tell me everything about the history of blank. Find another article. you gotta keep looking. And I know it's a pain, but that's a research project. You got to dig a little bit. It's not always going to be on the first page of the Google results that you get. Now, that being said, if you're having difficulty finding information on something specifically from your presentation, I would love to help you. You can definitely email me and say, hey, I found a little bit of information on the history here, but I'm looking for more detail about this. Absolutely. I will do some digging for you. I will help you find sources. Again, I'm here to help you. So I'm not saying that like you're on your own here. Try harder. I'm happy to help you, but just be aware that there is work involved here, that you do have to read things. So it's not necessarily going to be just something you copy and paste off of the internet. Oh, I've already found a timeline that exists and I'm just going to put it here. You're probably going to make the timeline from the information that you find. Okay. So anyway, I think that's probably straightforward. People already understand that, but, what was the need? Again, here, that's part of the technology development. What was the purpose of developing the technology? Sometimes the reason why it was developed is not the reason why it's currently used. Great example, the microwave oven. Initially, the technology was mistakenly invented as somebody was trying to develop a new type of radar for detecting planes during World War II. And they noticed that when they stood next to their radar device, they melted a chocolate bar that was in their jacket pocket. And then they noticed that whenever they stood near their radar device, they tended to feel the heat from the device at a distance. Probably wasn't very safe, but then that led to the idea of microwave technology, using a microwave to heat something up. It was a development from radar, which is kind of a weird association. But anyway, your technology may have a similar story. So the second component here is tell me about how it works. Not necessarily how you deploy it. So there is a slight difference there. Deploying the technology means like, how would you go into the room and operate the machine? You press a button, then you read a screen, then you press another button. That's like how you deploy it. That's like, as a technician, how you would operate it. That's not what I'm asking about here. I'm asking about, how does it work? Like, if you had to take it apart, what's going on inside that makes the device function? Okay, so you do have to dig a little bit here. Often students mix those two things up and they tell me about how you deploy it, like how you actually go in and operate it by pressing buttons and stuff. I don't need to know that information, but I do need you to describe, at least on some physical level, what is happening that makes the device function. Okay, is it producing gamma rays? How does it make gamma rays? You may have to look that up. There's probably a good YouTube video or something about how it does produce gamma rays, or whatever it does. Or how does an X-ray device actually produce and make X-rays? You're gonna have to look that up. So, and it's not that complicated, but you do have to investigate it. So try and dig a little bit below the surface. It's very easy to just say, well, yeah, it has a tube and X-rays come out of the tube. That's great. That's a good starting point. But like, where did they come from? How does it make X-rays? That's the level of detail that I'm looking for here. So tell me a little bit more about how your device actually functions, okay? And then lastly, tell me about the treatment and diagnosis of your particular illness, okay? Remember, it doesn't have to be both. It could be treatment or diagnosis. Some of them are both. So you're going to start by describing an illness of the digestive, respiratory, or circulatory system. That's correct. So you need at least 5 would be the minimum. If you only had one slide per, you'll have more than 5, almost certainly. Some of these are going to definitely go on to more than one slide, but it would be absolute minimum of 5. But so okay, so what does it treat or diagnose? Where was I? Yeah, describe it. So it says illnesses. That's kind of a typo. You can talk about multiple illnesses. I think in the exemplar that I've given here, the person talks about 2 different illnesses that the device is used for. You can do that. You don't have to talk about 2. You have to talk about at least one illness in detail. It's fine to talk about 2, but you do need to talk about 1 in detail. So what do I mean by in detail? I mean, you have to tell me about the causes of the illness, the symptoms of the illness and the treatment of the illness. And if this machine is part of the treatment, explain that. And if there are other elements to the treatment for this illness, explain those. Okay? You also need to explain how your device is used in the treatment or detection of your particular illness. So for example, if you're doing an X-ray, you need to talk about how an X-ray is actually used to figure out that somebody has your illness. Can you find an X-ray of somebody with that illness and then point out where the illness is on the X-ray? Cool. You should do that. Okay? But how is it actually diagnostically used, or as a treatment methodology, how is the device used to treat it? What is it doing to treat the illness? Okay, so you're connecting that device to your illness. Now remember that when you're describing your illness, the causes, symptoms, and treatment, take every opportunity that you can to talk about the physiology, that is the anatomy and the function of that anatomy from what you've learned in the course. You are using this project as a vessel to tell me about your knowledge from the course. So you're picking asthma. Okay, I'm just randomly choosing something here, but while you're discussing the causes, symptoms, and treatment, why don't you tell me, make sure you're using correct anatomical terms from the stuff that we learned in the unit. Make sure you're explaining how asthma affects your expiratory reserve volume, or your inspiratory reserve volume, or the rate at which you can inspire and expire. Or again, this is terminology that you're going to learn in the unit, but what I'm saying here is connect it to what you've learned. That's the whole point of this. So you could just give a very basic list. Here are the causes, blank, blank, blank. Here are the symptoms, blank, blank, blank. Here is the treatment, blank, blank. You could do that, but you wouldn't be connecting it with the course, which is the purpose of this. So take an opportunity here when you're talking about the causes, explain how the ciliated epithelium is affected in the respiratory tract when you have asthma, or cystic fibrosis, or whatever you're choosing. Okay, so do your best to try. This is the last part here, is where you're really going to be doing your connections between the unit that we've just done and your technology. Connect the things together. All right, so that part seems to be largely absent for when a lot of students do this. Okay, so I mentioned some other stuff here. Be sure to focus on an illness of one of these systems. Use your knowledge of the anatomy and structures of these systems in detail. Again, that's the point. And the last thing is a works cited. Okay, so you're going to give this presentation. You can record it. It doesn't have to be recorded with Loom, but a recording software for screen recording. Like I said, Loom works and it's free. But if you want another option, you can talk to me, or you can look stuff up. You're welcome. It doesn't have to be Loom. But remember that you need to submit your Loom presentation, or your whatever video, however you make it, and the research document. You don't have to submit your slideshow by itself, because I will be able to see your slideshow when I watch your video. So one last thing I'm going to mention about this, and I've covered everything here, but when you submit a presentation, take a moment, just a moment, to actually click on the thing that you've submitted and see, does it work? Okay? Just a moment. It really, especially if you're submitting a link to a video online, just click on the link and see if your video comes up when you click on it. You would not believe how often students hand stuff in, and then when I open it on my end, it's broken. It didn't encode properly. The link is incorrect. I would say it probably happens 1 in 10, which is ridiculous. It's so much. And so I'm always communicating with students and saying, hey, your link doesn't work. Your video didn't encode properly and doesn't work. I can't hear your voice in the video. There's no audio in the video. As you are reading in your video, your voice cuts in and out every 10 seconds. That kind of stuff. Check what you're submitting before you submit it. Don't just record the video and submit. Quickly review it. Is your voice hearable? Did you have your microphone turned on? Did you place the video of yourself speaking directly over top of something important from your presentation so that I can't see it? Think about those things while you're recording, guys. What is the product that you've created at the end, and is it actually functional? Is it what you wanted it to be? The audio issues are probably the most common, which is students record stuff and the audio is either not there or gets cut out. And I need your audio. I obviously have to be able to hear your presentation. So with that, one last thing that I want to mention here are some tips for making a good presentation. And I look for these. Oh, come on. Why didn't that work? There we go. I look for these when I'm marking your presentations. Did you include this stuff? Is it a visually appealing presentation? Okay, and effective. So some things that you should be considering when you make your presentation. Use bullets. Okay. For example, again, look at my example that I've provided. Copper is lustrous, highly malleable, not full sentence stuff. Are you talking about this slideshow that I'm doing right now, Brendan? This is posted in the assignment, so you can open this anytime. It's linked at the bottom of the assignment. You don't want to leave full sentences in your presentation. You don't want paragraphs on your presentation. You want bullets. Because if you are putting paragraphs on there, what you're doing is you're making a script. And a presentation shouldn't have a script on screen for you, because the presentation is not for you. It's for the viewer. So it should be as viewable as it can be for the viewer. You want to entice people to read what's on there. If you have paragraphs on your slides, no one will ever read them. Essentially, it's just a wall of text, and people will just say, well, I guess that's what it says on there, but no one's going to check. You are going to present the majority of the information by saying it. That's what a presentation is. And these slides are there as sort of an anchor point for the viewer. As you talk about a point, here's an interesting picture that kind of encapsulates what you're talking about. Or here are the 5 points I'm going to discuss. That kind of thing. But it's not a script. So if you do want to have a script, it shouldn't be on your slides. It should be located somewhere else. Now, there is a place in Google Slides to put a script if you want that. But you're probably better off to just have it in a different document or print it off. Use pictures. Wow, does it ever make your slideshow more interesting to watch? Not to mention, it allows the viewer to understand the things you're saying a lot better. So you do need to include pictures. When you talk about, oh, hey, in 1950, this was added to my technology and it made it a lot more usable. You have a picture of that? Like, show it to me. It makes it way, way better if you do that. So do that. Use fairly large size font. Okay, it doesn't have to be quite as big as the one I have on top there, but if you're giving it in a classroom, which you won't be in this case, you definitely want to use very large size because you want people all throughout the room to be able to see it. If you go micro font, no one will be able to read it. So, consider that. Be very careful with your color schemes. Okay, so this is a terrible color scheme, pink on multicolored background. Yes, you should include images, but it shouldn't be so distracting or clashing or difficult to view as this. Okay, so just try not to pick stuff that is this. This is also something that students tend to do a lot, and this is extremely difficult to follow. So please don't do that. Put your slideshow in the same order as the instruction sheet. Keep in mind, I'm viewing 33 of these in this class. In total, I'm viewing 66 of these because I have to mark the other classes as well. And so I'm used to seeing this information in a particular order. Virtually everybody puts them in the right order. And so I look for things. And now you have your slide on, this, and now you have your slide on this. If you start putting stuff out of order, that makes it extremely difficult for me to keep track of, did you do all of the things while I'm marking? Essentially, you're just making it harder for me to mark pointlessly. Don't do that. That's never in your best interests. That's a good lesson to learn for university too. Never give the TAs a hard time. Never make it hard for a TA to mark your assignment, because if you make it hard for them, they're probably just going to skip it, or they're just not going to read it very carefully. So don't do that. Okay. You want to make things as easy to mark as possible. Just put them in the order that I'm asking you to put them in. Check your spelling. Okay. If you have lots of spelling errors, or really any spelling errors in a finished product, that really implies that you rushed and that you didn't do a good job. Maybe that's not true. Maybe your presentation is excellent, But if it has obvious spelling errors in it, it really doesn't give that impression to the viewer. This is something that I saw in grad school all the time, and I guarantee that every prof that saw this in a grad school presentation cringed every time they saw a spelling error, because it really implies that you do not care about the thing that you just made. Most of these words get underlined for you in the software. The software is saying to you, hey, you made a mistake right here. And you're just like, I don't care. I'm just going to hand that in. I mean, that's really showing that you don't care. So, I mean, I'm not going to really date myself here, but when I was in high school, at least at the beginning of high school, like we didn't even have software to do presentations. Like I did presentations on like board, like I like drew stuff on boards. God, that makes me seem really old. But in that case, like if you had a spelling error, like maybe you didn't notice it. I actually, I showed my wife a picture of my science fair project for when I was in grade 8. And there's a very obvious spelling error right on the front of my science fair project. And my wife was like, you spelled that wrong. It's like, yeah, well, there was no spell check then. So, but now there is. So take advantage of the spell check. Don't use transitions and animations like this. Yeah, it's fun. It looks cool. But it actually just makes it less professional. So don't do this. No professional in a professional presentation will ever use these. So you save yourself the time and don't bother ever doing that. It's not as common now, but students used to do it all the time. Same thing goes for sounds. Nobody does this anymore, but when I was in university, it was common for people to use like slide transition sounds, like whoosh, or like have a sound like a boing every time like a point pops up onto the screen. You can do it, but it's really unprofessional. Don't do that. Anyway, make sure you're using proper APA formatting. You guys already know how to do this. You can use Citation Machine, or you can use Cite This For Me or whatever. But keep these things in mind when you're creating a presentation. You're going to do 3 more presentations. One in this unit, one in the plants unit, and one in the evolution unit. And so you're going to need to use this sort of thinking for each one of them. All right. That's enough about the presentation. I'm going to stop talking. Are there any questions overall about the presentation? I spent extra time talking about this one because, like I said, we do 3 of these, and most of the stuff that I just said applies to all 3. So I obviously won't go through this stuff all again every time, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, I'm going to assume that we're good. All right. And if not, I'll circle back as usual. We are on day 11. I'm sure it feels like it has been forever since you learned about the digestive system. 2 weeks ago, my goodness. That's nowhere near the top of your memory anymore. So what I have at the start here is a little video that is a summary of the digestive system. What does a digestive system do? What are the parts of a digestive system? How are enzymes involved? What is chemical digestion and physical digestion, etc.? Okay, it's not that long, but it is a review of the system. It's been a while. So I strongly encourage you to watch this review. I guess technically if you feel like you really remember everything about the digestive system, you're probably safe to skip it, but it's been a while, and I fully acknowledge that. So I would probably start with this. It's available to you if you'd like. All right. What we're going to do this morning is a lab. We're going to do, so you're going to log into your Explore Learning account. The link is right there. I don't think this link is going to be correct. This click here. Yep, it's going to say page not found because I didn't update that link. I got to update it. But that link was intended to go to the sign up page for Explore Learning. It's still there. The sign up page is on the very first day, the content from the live stream. If you go to day one, content from the live stream, and then you scroll down to, here we go, signing up for explorelearning.com. And if you click on that link, now that's for if you have not yet signed up for an Explore Learning account. we all did it on the first day, so I'm assuming people have already signed up. But if not, the instructions are still there, and you do need to sign up because we're going to be using it today. Okay, so then you are going to complete the this lab. There is an introduction. Really, the lab worksheet here takes you through step by step. So you're going to make a copy of this. There is sort of a pre-lab knowledge assessment. You're not going to submit this, by the way. This is for your information, and it's certainly going to promote better understanding of the digestive system as you go through. But like I said, there's sort of like a little warm up at the beginning here that you go through and just gets you thinking about what you currently know about the digestive system based on what you've learned. Okay, which organs do what and that kind of thing. Then it's going to walk you through step by step with the assembly of a virtual digestive system. Okay, it's kind of an interesting virtual lab where you're going to take parts of a digestive system, they're like virtual parts, arrange them, and then pass some food through them, a type of food. There's different types of food that you can pass through, and then look at how the food is digested. Then you're going to adjust that digestive system. So it asks you to, now we're going to add in a pancreas and like see how that changes how the food going through gets digested. And then it's going to ask you to sort of examine what you've just done. And then, oh, well, what if we add a stomach in and some stomach acid? How is that going to affect the digestion of this thing? And then so through doing that, through altering the system and then measuring the changes that happen to the food as it passes through, it gives you sort of like a functional example of what these various processes are doing in terms of the digestion of food. So like, what is the contribution of stomach acid to digestion? What is the contribution of pancreatic lipase? Okay, so by the way, those are things that we talked about before you left for 2 weeks. So we talked about the digestive enzymes, where they're produced, what they do, how they break down the macromolecules into their components, their single subunits. If you want to have a quick look over that note from before the break, that probably wouldn't be a bad idea either, but I'll leave it up to you. I realize that it's been a while. Ideally, obviously, we would do this all in one shot and wouldn't have a ridiculous 2-week break right in the middle of the course, but I mean, that's where we are. So anyway, that's how the lab works. You just basically go through the whole thing and you progressively build a more complex digestive system as you go, and then look at how that affects the end product. And through that, you do, I mean, I personally thought it was great. It does enrich your understanding of what each component is contributing to the digestion of food. Okay, so you're going to do that. After you're done, right underneath the gizmo, there is a quiz. It's not for marks, but it's just like our exit quizzes that we do at the end of each section. It's going to assess your understanding of the stuff that you did during the lab. And so do the assessment and look at the answers and look at whether or not there were components of it that you didn't understand. If you got some wrong and you're not sure why they're wrong, go back and look over stuff again and try and figure it out. And if you can't figure it out, come and see me during Learning Block 3. That's why I'm here to support you guys. Or actually, it doesn't have to be during Learning Block 3. Type it in the chat. I'm happy to help you. Like I'm going to be here the entire time. So if you're stuck at any point while you're doing the lab, or you're not sure what you're doing, or just let me know, and I'm happy to figure things out with you. Okay, so that's during Learning Block 1. That's in the morning. In the afternoon, we have a little bit more relaxed of a day. We're going to watch a little documentary together called The Breath of Life, and this is going to be an introduction to the respiratory system. I like this. It's a little bit older, but it has a bunch of really cool video of what the inside of the system looks like. So anyway, highly recommend. I will, there's a worksheet that goes along with it, which is linked at the top here. This is in a sort of a Word document format. Why is this playing? Word document format, and there's also one that's in Google Doc form. I have them both, so you can use either one. Why did that just crash? The reason I'm going through the Block 2 stuff now is in case you finished the lab early. You could could go through the lab a little faster. Some people do. So once you've watched that video, there is a short little reading from the textbook. It's just page 438 and 439, which is, again, it's more of a structural introduction to the respiratory system. And then you're going to add some stuff to your vocabulary list at that point, okay? The second component of this is a short, I think it's a 5-minute video, which is just looking at the purpose for respiration. And this is where you're going to be introduced to probably the most important biological molecule other than DNA, which is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate is the energy molecule of life. It is what all cells produce and most cellular functions use as their energy source in the cell. It's what the mitochondria is making. It's the purpose of the mitochondria. So this is going to talk a little bit about energy flow and how we make ATP and what we need to make ATP and what energy flow looks like in organisms. Basically why you breathe, okay? Because oxygen obviously is a key component to this. So it's going to connect everything together to maintaining your life and your existence in your cells via production of ATP from oxygen. All right, like I said, it's only a 5-minute video, but it is an excellent video of explaining how that process works. And that process is really key to tying these systems together. It's the one thing that ties together the digestive, respiratory, and circulatory systems, because energy is the thing that ties them all together. You get the energy from taking it in through your digestion. You move that energy molecule to your cells for use in respiration. That's the circulatory system. You also move the oxygen around your system through the respiratory system, which you need for this process. And the respiratory system is how you get the oxygen in and the products of it out, carbon dioxide. So this energy system sort of ties all three of the systems together. Anyway, short video, and then there is a little exit quiz just to look at your knowledge of the respiratory system. This is just an introduction to respiration, though, so we don't get into really any deep anatomy stuff today. Tomorrow is when we're going to really do a deep dive and talk about the anatomy of the respiratory system and some illnesses of the respiratory system. That's on day 12. Okay, guys, I'm going to let you get to work. I've talked a lot. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to post them in the chat. I'm going to get to work marking, and I'll be getting stuff back to you as they're completed. And let me know if you have any questions. And I was going to say something else, but I forgot what it was. Oh, yes. We'll be back at 11:05 for attendance for the second half. Good luck. Jeez, am I ever all over the place today? Sorry. Let me know if you haven't done so already in the comments. I'll have to delete that part off the video. Sorry about that. If you have any questions about the content from the day so far or from the lab, please let me know. I haven't seen anything or any emails from anybody yet, but if you're having any difficulty, please let me know. Just so you know, I don't have anything further to add. So if you have already checked in attendance-wise, feel free to just continue working. You can, if you're hopefully you're onto the documentary, you may still be working on the lab, and that's totally fine at this point. But you can move on to the respiratory system documentary. There's a attached worksheet, and then there's a short video after that. No, you don't, Kim. You don't need to submit the lab document. I would have it available to you while you're writing the quiz for the unit, since I ask some questions alluding to function of, and it might be helpful as a reference while you're writing the quiz, but it's really just to promote understanding of the structure and function of those structures in the digestive system, and it's not like a formal lab report, so you're not going to be submitting it. I'm going to let you guys get back to work. Please let me know if you need anything. And Sammy, I noticed that you sent me an email here. I'm going to respond to it right now.